Welcome. I'm Mike Paparian. I'm on the board of Solar Cookers International. And joining me here are a distinguished group of experts in the solar field, including Julie Green from Solar Cookers International, Caitlin Hughes from Solar Cookers International, Laurent Dietrich from Energies 2050, David Rene from the International Solar Energy Society, and Rana Adib from REN 21. I'm going to let everybody provide further introductions of themselves when it's their turn to speak. We're here today to talk about solar cookers and the role of solar cookers in addressing climate issues. And just briefly, we're talking a lot at COP23 about a lot of zero things: zero net energy buildings, zero emission vehicles, zero emission power, a lot of zero things. But what's not being talked about very much is zero emission cooking. Cooking is a very significant contributor to greenhouse gases worldwide. And in fact, you're going to hear in a minute about how the NDCs, if you look at all the NDCs that have been developed, only 2 of them mention zero emission cooking. So we're going to dive right into the subject right now, and Julie Green is going to lead us off.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Julie Green, Executive Director of Solar Cookers International, and this morning we'll be mentioning a few things. It always helps to begin with explaining the technology a little bit. There's been a lot of discussion about solar. Usually that refers to solar photovoltaic. Solar cooking is solar thermal, so we'll be giving a brief description about that technology. The role that solar cooking has to play in meeting not only the SDGs, but also the ambitious climate goals, the ambitious and necessary climate goals set by the Paris Agreement in 2015. How SCI helps to grow this ecosystem to make certain that we're participating in these global efforts toward net zero. And also we'll be talking a little bit about SCI's advocacy efforts. First of all, the technologies. Rather than converting solar energy into electricity, solar cookers convert solar energy directly into heat that's used immediately for cooking and water pasteurization. Some of the recent developments include also solar thermal energy storage, which of course is really important for people who need to cook after the sun goes down or need to cook if it's snowing or raining. So we realize as a sector how important it is to develop that as well. Solar cooking is usually adopted first where there are few choices for energy access. So these will predictably be the places where solar cooking will be adapted first. For instance, where women spend hours and hours every day gathering fuel, or where they purchase very expensive and scarce fuels for cooking and water pasteurization. Also, solar cooking, because it is zero emission, definitely has positive health impacts for humans and for the environment. There are many different kinds of solar cookers. One of them is on display. It's a simple panel cooker. There are now hundreds of kinds of different solar cookers that cook every kind of food that human beings eat. So they can cook flatbreads and stews and rice and curries. Everything that humans eat can be cooked on one or another type of solar cooker. There is also a development in certain parts of the world for institutional scale solar cooking. Brahma Kumaris, for instance, in India, has installations that feed thousands of people every day on a regular basis, saving consistently large amounts of energy during cooking. Solar cooking, of course, being net zero, does not contribute black carbon soot to the atmosphere. It helps to preserve environments in many of the ways that we're very familiar with whenever we're managing to save trees. In addition, solar cooking helps to meet all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a very robust solution that can have great impact by including it in our international advocacy efforts. I'll turn it over to Caitlin Hughes, who is SCI's program manager.
Thank you very much, and I would like to say a big thank you to Energies 2050 for inviting us to do this side event with them. We're very excited to talk about the synergies that we have with Energies 2050, as well as our other distinguished speakers and their organizations. So I'm going to provide a little bit more detail in terms of how Solar Cookers International works and what we do to accomplish these similar goals with our partner organizations. One of the things that Solar Cookers International does is we convene our partners, hundreds of partners from over 135 countries, to get together and share knowledge and opportunities, to share best practices so that we can all learn from each other and amplify our efforts. For example, Solar Cookers International just organized the 6th SCI World Conference in India in January, and we were able to bring hundreds of our partners to present on their areas of expertise so that we can advance the whole sector together. Solar Cookers International also provides webinar opportunities for ourselves and our partners to share that knowledge, for people who might not be able to fly halfway around the world to share that knowledge. Solar Cookers International also really leads the sector and drives decision-making in terms of topics that need to be addressed. For example, Solar Cookers International, with our partners, developed an adoption and impact survey. And that's so we can see the impact that solar cookers are having all around the world. Solar Cookers International also manages the world's largest online database of solar cooking information, the Solar Cooking Wiki. It has over 1,700 pages of information about solar cooking, as well as contacts for our partners all around the world, which we encourage you to look at solarcooking.org. We also encourage our partners to share their knowledge through webinars, and we help build their capacity. Solar Cookers International also leads the Solar Cookers International Association. This is a professional association that helps our partners gain recognition across the sector and beyond. With a problem that affects half the world's population, 3 billion people, Solar Cookers International understands the need for scalable implementation projects. We help our partners do this and develop their entrepreneurship skills to make solar cooking accessible to even more people. We do this through providing workshops. For example, we offered a social entrepreneurship workshop immediately following the 6th SCI World Conference in India. This was with a partnership through the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stove and with the Boost workshop. We also provide webinars showcasing this particular area of expertise with partners who have been successful, for example, in Mali and Uganda. We also provide opportunities for our partners to learn from each other face-to-face. Solar Cookers International was able to support one of our partners to visit a successful solar cooking business in Uganda and see what was working. Solar Cookers International also attended a social capital markets conference, and we were able to connect new and existing solar cooking entrepreneurs with each other to expand our impact. Solar Cookers International also, as Julie mentioned, works with our partners who are achieving institutional scale with solar cooking, including Brahma Kumaris. We were able to facilitate a site visit through the Clean Cooking Forum in Delhi just this past month. And we are also able to provide site visits immediately following the 6th SCI World Conference for our partners to experience from all around the world. Solar Cookers International, as the leader of the solar cooking sector, works to pool and share knowledge. Many of our partners understand the importance of data. For example, Solar Cookers International is a lead topical contributor to REN21. We're also a collaborator for the Global Burden of Disease with the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. By working with our hundreds of partners, we know about the existence of over 3.1 million solar cookers all around the world, which are directly impacting 11 million people. We estimate that 4 billion meals have been cooked with solar thermal technology, and that 377 megawatts of thermal heat capacity exist. We estimate that these 3.1 million solar cookers have reduced carbon dioxide emissions by 26 million tons. And we estimate, or we guess that there's even more. This is what we've been able to calculate so far, and our efforts are continuing with the help of our partners. We also estimate that $200 billion in potential savings and benefits exist with solar cooking.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you. Caitlin has only touched a little bit on how SCI during its 30 years has come to understand the importance of working with partners for data collection, for advocacy, for following the international renewable energy trends, because this is work that doesn't happen in silos. It's very important to have the collaborative efforts, and so we're very pleased to be here today and exploring this further with our wonderful guests. One new thing that SCI has been working on is an accountability standard for the solar cooking technologies. For those of you who are familiar with Consumer Reports, it's a way to make technologies and their performance accessible to users. And this can be users who are women who live in the last mile and are looking for new ways to have access to energy for cooking. And it can also be agencies such as the UN High Commission on Refugees when they're looking for an appropriate technology for an important project. So Solar Cookers International, working from an array of different internationally recognized standards, we selected one that had the most credibility and longevity. And we have used that to develop a performance evaluation process. So we have a way to evaluate the power, the cooking power in wattage for solar cookers. This is the first of several different evaluation processes that we'll have that will eventually, of course, include cost, types of food cooked, and user interface. In other words, how friendly a solar cooker is it? Is it difficult to use? Is it easy to use? Is it effective? And does it fit the culture? So stay tuned. Those things will be coming. In addition, because many governments won't invest in technologies that they consider unproven, Solar Cookers International knew that we had to provide evidence that this is a credible technology. So we're currently participating in the International Organization of Standardization process, the TC 285 for a Clean Cook Stove Standard, working to make sure that solar cookers, which are zero emission, are considered in the Clean Cook Stove Standard, because then it will be accessible as a valuable choice for governments who are looking to address their energy access needs. Of course, attending meetings and conferences is a very important way to begin collaborations that are so necessary for the work to happen. We rely on our partners in so many places because of their in-depth knowledge of their cultures, the situation, and the local economies as well. So SCI works at the United Nations in New York as our primary campus, and that's an opportunity that we have to interact with the nation leaders and permanent delegates proposing the solar cooking solution. An exciting opportunity, especially with the 2015 agreement for Paris, is that there are already 2 countries that have made an effort to include solar cooking in their NDCs. This obviously is a growth area because there were 2 out of the submitted. There are others in addition who mention cooking but haven't gone so far as to mention solar cooking. So there's an immediate way to boost the goals by including solar thermal cooking in NDCs. We have this language that will be available on our website, so it will be easy for people writing the NDCs to use that language. Sometimes it can be done in an existing context already simply by adding a simple phrase. There are also ways to include solar cooking in VNRs, and that information is available also on our website, and we're happy to be a resource for countries who would like to add this important way to boost their impact through the NDCs. Caitlin?
Thank you, Julie. I would also like to invite everyone to participate in the other events that Solar Cookers International is offering here at COP23. This is another way to learn about our additional partnerships and work. For example, we will be doing a Better Together side event emphasizing the role of women in energy, coming this Monday, the 13th of November in the South Africa Pavilion from 1500 to 1630. Solar Cookers International will also be holding 2 press conferences, the first of which on Tuesday, the 14th of November from 17 to 17:30. And also, our distinguished Julie Green will be giving the Climate Matters interview from 1500 to 15:30 on Wednesday, the 15th of November. Both of those will be televised, so we invite you to follow along either in person or through UNTV.
All right, next up is Laurent from Energy 2050.
I'm not sure we can hear you. You may want to introduce yourself.
Hello to everyone. So my name is Laurent Dietrich, and I am a member of Energy 2050, the NGO. Just to briefly present Energy 2050 before we get into the meat of the topic. Energy 2050 is a French independent NGO created 7 years ago. We mainly focus on creating knowledge in the sustainable development, climate change, energy efficiency domains, mainly through hands-on projects, including studies, research, practical, actual country activities in developing countries. But we also try to help and distribute the good word through communication, be it conferences and debates, obviously, also organizing discussions, debates through civil society, publications, and also some cross-cutting activities, for example, in civil societies, such as the Arts Planet project that we have, merging arts, climate change, and sustainable development together. As well as, obviously, education, which is probably one of the most important things that we can bring to the world today. Energy 2050 has namely been behind 7 INDCs in mostly African countries that we have helped prepare and finalize. We have participated in numerous international financial organization projects, Africa, Asia, and elsewhere, as well as the Mediterranean, with a big concentration on the Mediterranean as well. And also much work on additionality and finance additionality, including on climate change instruments. To very quickly delve into the main topic, the discussion being today how to get more inclusion of solar cookers in national NDCs. I guess the main question is how can we get more integration of solar cooker issues and increase, obviously, visibility and potential budget mobilization for this extraordinary technology. I think it's a very interesting question and approach. Maybe one of the questions being, is it most logical to prepare to pursue a top-down inclusion model or more of a bottom-up one, considering how difficult it can sometimes be to motivate the political sort of bodies within the countries to actually address some of these issues, which don't make the greatest of ribbon-cutting opportunities. So I think that the main question is mainly how can we increase and greatly increase the deployment for this technology. And obviously the scaling up may also come from a bottom-up approach as well. which would bring more generalization of the technology itself and help to increase the power and the pressure behind the inclusion in sort of specific national objectives. One of those approaches, or I wouldn't call it innovative, I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here, obviously, maybe to generalize a little bit the solar cooker potential into other areas beyond cooking, and look a little bit into sort of the applications that we can use and that can help deploy the technology itself with obviously the end objective of getting into the solar cooking area. And depending on the structure of the countries, the civil society and the society organization, one of those approaches, for example, could be taking a more in-depth look at some of what the French would call, I mean, obviously Energy 2050 French, we've got to refer to it, taking a stronger look at some of the, what we would call public services, how you can include solar cookers in some of these public service notions, such as health, for example, looking at the health centers, things like this, which can create the root, the basis, the bridgehead for then deploying the technology to the rest of the community within that area. Obviously, one of the issues with these types of technologies is how do you get the deployment and how do you get the expertise which allows you to deploy it in a successful and sustainable way. One of the other bigger issues, I'd say, is probably reaching the necessary critical size where you get the necessary visibility and where you're able to mobilize sufficient budgets and obviously as well quantify some of, for example, the climate change benefits that solar cookers obviously bring. To bring it back to sort of our topic of how can we collaborate better together, what types of themes can we think of, go into some of the specific projects that Energy 2050 is working on today that we could potentially include these issues in, for example. Obviously, we have had and continue to have a lot of work in writing up and following up on the NDCs in many of these countries. Obviously, that's going to be one of the topics of potential inclusion. But going beyond that, and maybe even more interesting for solar cookers, is one of the projects that we're working on right now, which is in the regionalization of these NDCs, and where you can get this regional approach of looking at maybe, for example, some of those public services, and looking at how you can start working on a deployment model for these technologies within work that's already done, and then have a sort of trickle down, or rather trickle up in this case, effect on the national NDCs of the countries themselves. And finally, obviously a lot of our work has been on climate additional funding, additionality funding, and that's also one of the topics that we could sort of consider working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. And thank again Energies 2050 for making it possible for us to have this event here this morning. Next up, David Renee from the International Solar Energy Society.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for letting me be here today. I appreciate this opportunity. First, let me just give some quick background on the International Solar Energy Society. This is probably the oldest solar energy association that's around. It was started actually back in 1954 in the United States. In 1970, the society became an international society, and we started forming sections around the world, the first being our U.S. section, the American Solar Energy Society, as well as Australian Solar Energy Society. Our membership is primarily focused on solar research and development and deployments. That's been our traditional membership base. And so we've been largely an academic and research-focused organization. But in the last 10 to 20 years or so, as we see these technologies that we've worked so hard in the laboratory becoming commercially viable, our society is now focusing more and more on partnering with organizations such as Solar Cookers International to help advocate these technologies in the way that they've been researched within members of our society, for example. And in fact, we do have a number of members that I'm aware of that are actively involved in solar cooking technology research and development. The society focuses on providing information outreach of a good quality technical nature to the community at large. We publish the Solar Energy Journal, which has been around since about 1970, and I still think it's a preeminent journal on solar energy research, and it does include articles on solar cooking technologies. We also now have a monthly webinar series, and I'm proud that SCI was participated in one of our webinars a few months ago. It's very broadly attended from people around the world. These webinars are presented live, but then are made available in recorded basis on our website to our membership. We also have a biennial congress at different places around the world. We just last week completed our congress in Abu Dhabi, where we were combined with the solar heating and cooling program from the International Energy Agency. So it was a congress that reflected on solar technologies covering all end-use energy sectors, not just the electrical sector, which is photovoltaics, but the solar heating and cooling sector, as well as the transport sector, which is rapidly becoming electrified, as we all know. But I think it's important to note that the power sector still only represents about 20% of our total end-use energy consumption. Nearly 50% is tied up in the heating sector, which means heating for space heating for buildings, solar water heating for not only residential use but for industrial processes, and solar cooking. These are among the key technologies that are key areas that are end-use energy in the heat sector involved. And so I think, and ISES is proud to have a partnership relationship with Solar Cookers International, because we feel very strongly that that is an important end-use energy consumption that must be addressed as we look to decarbonizing our overall energy system. ISES going forward is really focusing on a potential 100% renewable energy scenario by certainly before the end of this century. That's an absolute essential goal to reach in order to achieve the Paris climate goals. But it's also a goal that is going to, in my view, and in the view of most of our members, of course, is that renewable energy technologies, which includes these heat technologies, are really the most economically viable way and an efficient and effective way to provide energy access for the entire world in a decarbonized way. And so that's the mission that our society is currently focusing on. We continue to embrace the research and development community. We have about 2,000 members around the world that are primarily focused on research, but our partnerships with key advocacy organizations such as Solar Cookers International and others, REN21, the Global Solar Council, the IRENA Coalition for Action. We're working with all of these organizations to connect the research community with the advocacy community so we can really push these technologies forward in a much more effective manner.
Thank you. And then our last speaker is Rana Adib from REN21.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm the research coordinator from REN21, which is the Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st century. And I'm very happy to be here at the Energy 2050 and SCI side event because these are partners who are collaborating in all our activities. And we're always very happy when we have the opportunity to also do presentations on technologies which are relevant to energy access, because that's something which does not always have so much attention. Very quickly, Rentren One is the global multi-stakeholder network which is dedicated to the rapid uptake of renewable energy worldwide. We're convening players from governments, international organizations, NGOs, research and academia, and civil society. Sorry, I had this already, so civil society twice. It's because you're so important. No, this is... the multi-stakeholder approach is very important for us because we really see that the solutions, yeah, there are top-down solutions, there are bottom-up solutions, but what is very, very important is that there is a interdisciplinary and a cross-cutting approach here, and that's why it's super important to involve the different stakeholder groups. I will very quickly, oh, something weird happened to the slide, but well, I'm not sure you can see that, but it's okay, great. I will just very quickly show you some results from our main publication, which is the Renewables Global Stats Report, which is a report we're producing annually, and it's really a collaborative effort. So we have around 450 experts actively participating in the production of this report, by being authors, contributors, reviewers, and this is a report where we are covering basically the trends of the last year, very recent trends of all renewable energy technologies in power, heating, and cooling, and transport. We are also reporting on energy efficiency, and we have, since a couple of years, a chapter on distributed renewable energy, where obviously solar cookers are being covered. Very quickly, we heard about the fact that even though electricity is only covering or represents only approximately 20% of the final energy demand, we have a lot of activities ongoing in renewable energy in the power sector, and there is also a lot of policy attention. The very good news is there are 176 countries which have renewable energy targets. However, when you're looking at the bluish part, this is all power policies, whereas the orange part is heating and cooling. So it is very clear that there is a need to shift this attention also to heating and cooling, but also transport. In 2015, renewable energy represented 19.3% of the global final energy consumption. So that's good news. It's definitely not going quick enough if we think about the Paris Agreement goals, but also the SDGs, SDG 7 in particular. Yes, power. I need to speak about power. I know we are talking about heating and cooling, but it is important because we can also learn a lot about this. Power is very clearly the market or the area where most of the things have been ongoing. Today, PV and wind are cost competitive, and this has really also brought another maturity to the markets. Another interest of investors, of private sector, etc., and also by this of governments. In 2016, 161 gigawatt have been added and installed renewable energy power capacities, and this comprised 30% or represented 30% of world generating capacity. Now, when we're looking at heating and cooling, and I'm specifically showing this slide as a contrast, we do have some data on heating and cooling, similar to what we have in the power sector, but it is less detailed because it's much more distributed. And I think this is definitely something which is also something the sector needs to address, also solar cooking needs to address, because it is important to have good data and consult data to also show the importance of the sector, show investment opportunities of the sector, etc. However, there is things ongoing, heating and cooling. Renewable energy represented 9% of the total global heat demand. But it's very clear, so biomass, solar thermal, and geothermal do play a role here. What is very clear is the policy frameworks need to really foster these developments. I'm not talking about transport here. We are facing, however, similar challenges in the transport sector. Now, when we're looking into why is renewable energy important too, I mean, we're talking about real investment opportunities. And in 2016, the investment represented in renewable energy represented 241.6 billion US dollars. They were down from 2015, and this is really explained by the fact that there is a lot of investment ongoing in the power market, and that for integrating variable renewable energy like wind and PV, there is a need to really invest also in the infrastructure. And for instance, China is investing a lot in transmission distribution infrastructure to allow for better intake of renewables. Renewable energy also means jobs. And again, why am I showing this here? It's not, I know that it's not super relevant to solar heating and cooking, but it is relevant because this type of information can really trigger the interest of policymakers. And so jobs in renewable energy is 9.8 million jobs worldwide. And this is an increase over 2015 of 1.1%. Obviously, when you're looking at the different types of jobs, you see that, for instance, bioenergy is a more job-intensive work sector, which can also contribute to political choices on the renewable energy strategies taken. And especially when we're looking at Africa, this is something which is to take into account when you consider the high youth unemployment rate and also growth rate of population. Now, coming to a sector which is highly relevant here. As I said, we have a chapter on distributed renewable energy, and since something like 3 years, we have specifically reached out to partners like SCI through ISES, SC for All, also practitioners like Energie 2050, to contribute better data on distributed renewable energy for energy access. A big challenge here is very clearly that this data it's lots of grassroots movements, it's lots of players, it's different type of players, and there is very little consolidated data. Today we are super happy, I mean that's the first year in 2016 in Global Stats Report that we are able to have good clean cookstove data, which is also linked to the fact that the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstove is putting efforts into having better data. And so on the clean cookstove, there were 20 million clean cookstove being distributed in 2015, which is an increase of 18% over the previous years. China clearly leads the installations here, and the top 5 countries are China, India, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Bangladesh. Oh, if I move here, you hear me better. Excellent. So, now, when we are specifically thinking about solar cookers, we do not have very detailed data on solar cookers here. What we managed to have data-wise was information on biogas plants, market information on biogas plants, and that's what you see here on the slide. Very clearly, AGL leads biogas plants. And top 5 countries are China, India, Nepal. Sorry, it's very small here. I need to move there. Bangladesh. Okay, I can see it. You can probably better read it. Okay, I'll let you read it. China was leading with 42.6 million units at the end of 2016, and India with 4.7 million units. It's Colombia and Kenya. Thank you. Excellent. Now, again, on the investment, there is some global data available on the investment, and we know that clean cookstoves, the investment in clean cookstoves increased by 28% and reached 11.5 million USD in 2015. So you see there is also a big variation, which is also linked to the fact that very often clean cookstoves are being deployed in a programmatic way too. And that most probably in these numbers, all grassroots movements, because there are grassroots movements, we're also having commercial markets, semi-commercial markets are not captured in this data. So that's also why you see a huge variation very clearly. Now, that's definitely a call to also look basically at SCI in particular, but also practitioners to really see how you can consolidate the data to have better market information on these specific technologies. Now, I'm looking at the electricity sector just because it's something where we see that during the last couple of years there was a lot of private market development, and as a result there is really an organization also of the private sector, and they are coming up with better market data. Basically with the GOGLA, the Global Alliance of Global Lighting Association, but also the Alliance for Rural Electrification are working together to have better data. And this clearly leads to the fact that there is a better idea of what is out there. So there's sales of off-grid solar systems have reached 8.1 million units worldwide. But there is also much better data available on the different investments, and this really helped, for instance, the pay-as-you-go companies to also attract investment, because in the end, whether it is a top-down or a bottom-up approach, you need investors, you need money. And these people also need to understand that there is a potential in the markets, and that's why we really think, I mean, you need to have good data for policy formulation, for energy planning, but also for attracting investment. So this sector shows you that it is possible if you can mobilize the industry to really see an interest, to share the data, to contribute, then this will definitely have a positive impact for a full sector. So quickly the conclusions. Yes, good, comprehensive, and also timely data is very important. I did not speak about timeliness, but I think it is something which is very important in sectors like renewable energy. It is important to have timely information. During the last 3 years, 70% of the PV installed capacities have been added. So data which is 2, 3, 4 years old does not show this trend. I mean, that's something super important. Data on distributed renewables is improving for energy access, but there is still some improvements possible. So it's clearly an invitation to use sectoral experts to help us improve this. And to use also the Renewables Global Stats Report as a platform to do that, because many people read this publication. When we're looking at the renewable energy sector, the global renewable energy transition is advancing with record capacities reached, in particular in the power sector. And the positive news being at the COP here is that renewable energy and energy efficiency have contributed to decoupling the economic growth of CO2 emissions. Or energy-related CO2 emissions. However, it's also clear that progress is not fast enough to reach the Paris Agreement, and when we are looking at the solar cookers, in particular, the Sustainable Development Goals on energy access. So visit us on the website. We also have a booth. I'm here in case of questions, and I really invite you to participate in our activities, because it's a very collaborative approach, and it's an opportunity for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. And I've got a couple of questions here for folks. So in Julie's opening, she mentioned that there's going to be an event focusing on women and solar cooking. I wonder if anyone on the panel wants to comment a little further on that, how solar cooking can impact women's lives, or how linking up to some of the entities pushing for women's rights might be helpful in pursuing a solar cooking agenda.
Thank you, Mike. We know that in many cultures, a woman's time is not monetized. If she spends 10 to 20 hours per week gathering biomass fuel, that's not considered part of the family's economic equation, although it certainly has a definite impact on quality of life and diminished opportunities. Often this task falls to women and children. So the fact that a solar cooker can reduce the amount of biomass fuel that a woman needs to gather or purchase is truly life-changing. Most of us can imagine that if a significant portion of our week were freed up to pursue other things, how different our lives would be. This is true also for children. In some places, children are required to show up at school in the morning having gathered the amount of biomass fuel that they would gather for their family for the week. So in other words, this has doubled the amount of time children spend far from the safety of the local community, traveling further and further over time to gather wood instead of studying, instead of spending time in education, and of course they're exposed to extra danger as well. So in addition to generally improving quality of life, solar cooking, we have found, offers women opportunities for leadership in their communities as well. Because cooking is traditionally a woman's activity, she's the one who trains her neighbors how to make and use solar cookers, also how to repair them, and how to use them for other activities. Solar cookers can also be used to heat irons, for instance, for local laundries. In some places, women use them to preserve food or to dry food to add post-harvest value. One of our partners, for instance, solar dries food and she markets those locally, and so she can charge a little bit more because she has produced solar processed food. So these are just a few ways that women's lives can be impacted, not only increasing energy access, but also providing economic opportunities.
Thank you. Rana and David, you both mentioned an interesting issue, and that is related to the data associated with solar cookers. Rana, you talked about the need for better data. David, you talked about how this is such a diffuse technology. It's not I think you said there's no opportunities for ribbon cutting. It's almost as decentralized as it gets when the individual uses it. What can we do to improve the data associated with such a diffuse technology? And I don't know which one of you or both of you want to answer that.
Okay, so what you can do is definitely better organize the sector. You mentioned industry associations. I think this is something which is fundamental because the businesses, I'm not sure it works, but the businesses actually do have the data. Very often it's not their priority because to consolidate the data, but I think it's really raising the awareness in these industries and businesses that data is important. Working together when we are thinking about the top-down approach really with the development organizations to really share this data and really see it as an activity of the sector to also include it. And gathering the data is also time and resources and costs, so it's also important that players working on data and knowledge really build this into their resources and raise the awareness also of donors or funders that this is an activity which is key but which also costs. Otherwise, the private sector it is difficult for small companies to build to buy into this. The other part is, I'm not sure to what extent solar cookers is the best or already have this maturity level, but very clearly what we see in the electricity sector also, even if it's a diffused technology when we're talking about solar home systems, solar lanterns, is that there is a lot of digitalization taking place when we're talking about operation maintenance, but also managing the systems. To some extent, this really is an opportunity for gathering more data.
Go ahead.
Well, it's hard to build on those comments, but I would like to say that any new technology is the challenge when facing any new technology, and I'm not saying solar cookers is a new technology, but because of its diffuse nature in the economy, it's becoming new to many new parts of society. But the challenge is getting public acceptance to these technologies. And I think some comments were made very effectively in that regard earlier about how do you get women to acknowledge and accept a new way of cooking their meals for their families and using solar rather than using traditional biomass, for example. So I think to help that process along, I'm a strong believer in partnerships, and so as I said in my earlier statements, I think partnering, Solar Cooker International, of course, has a very important role to play in responding to the question that you have posed. And I think by strategic partnerships with other organizations that can help get the word out to broader audiences. For example, there may be parts of our membership base in the International Solar Energy Society that would really benefit from learning more about solar cookers. And so the idea of having a webinar to introduce these technologies to our membership can help spread the word, because many of our members are in countries that could really benefit from solar cooker technology. So I think partnering with other strategic organizations to help get the word out is one of the key ways, especially when you have a very diffuse, appropriate technology like solar cooking.
Thank you. And Laurent, you mentioned that Energies 2050 helped develop 7 NDCs, mostly in Africa. My question is, Julie mentioned that only about a quarter of the NDCs worldwide mention cooking at all, and only about 1% of the NDCs mention fossil-free cooking, that is solar cooking. What could be done to improve that in the next round of NDCs or amendments to NDCs? What could be done to get better attention from the top down? And I see you pointing to your colleague Stepan, our president. Yep. I don't know if you want to answer that, or Stepan. Would you like to step up and answer that, or any thoughts you might have?
No, I think this is an important question, and so far, I think we are speaking maybe some different world at the end, because this is the world that this is the services to be provided and helpful for people. So this is clear. So I think we don't need anymore to make advocacy, because we have sufficient case studies, example, even data somewhere. Even if I know this is lacking everywhere, but let's say, okay, we have sufficient knowledge to demonstrate this is something helpful, clear. On the other side, on the policy side, let's say, only few people, few governments are fully aware about what they can use with this technology, because the lack of data, because the lack of knowledge, maybe also the lack of interest, and also the lack of finance. So this is a big picture so far, as soon. So even if they put on the INDC, this is not the good solution. Why? Because INDC, so far, for many developing countries, has only been something to draft as urgently as possible, don't really understand how they will put in place their, let's say, roadmap. And now, because there is an agreement, everything has been committed. So all the country will have to demonstrate and to put concrete action to be in position to have at the end of the 2030 the real, let's say, achievement. And this is the challenging issue, because you speak about solar cooking, but we can speak about building, we can speak about cities. So sometimes they mention very important subjects, both on adaptation and mitigation, because for developing countries, to answer your question, our vision was not to speak about mitigation. We were speaking about adaptation with co-benefit on mitigation. And this makes sense, because if you go to Togo, for example, we've been involved there, 0.04%, frankly, if you speak about mitigation, especially with land use or something like that, okay, you make a mistake. So this is very challenging, because even these guys, and they are very, let's say, clever, they know exactly the picture, but they are suffering the lack of finance, of knowledge, and also about robustness of policy. So if you ask these people to put some work, you need to demonstrate how you are going to implement. Otherwise, it makes no sense. And in addition, you are also obliged to make connection about the financial aspect. And so far, all the rules are mostly against this kind of technology. Because if you go to the Green Climate Fund, okay, are you going to measure women empowerment? Wonderful. It makes no sense. But you need to put data on adaptation. And this is important. You need to work on MRV. You need to work on transparency. So this is why we are so concerned about climate finance, because we think this is compulsory. We need collectively, and this is why we love to be partner and involved in concrete projects to try to, let's say, not explain, but not advocate, but testimony this is feasible. We can put some data to be consistent and to suppose and submit some proposal to adaptation fund, to the Green Climate Fund, even if some of them put them, but also to make this kind of, let's say, like ET Carbon you have on here. We have an additionality project dedicated to Africa to try to also put a solidarity aspect on the carbon price to make things feasible on adaptation, because we know this will be the challenging issue. For me, solar cooking and other technology is not a question of explaining. Everybody is convinced. If you find one guy here to say this is a poor technology, it makes nothing for people, frankly, I will be really surprised. And I need to discuss with these guys or this woman. But for me, it's not a big issue. But if you discuss with government, with local authority, wow, they are facing such a huge amount of things to change in the same times that focusing on one issue is really challenging. So this is why I'm really convinced we all know, we all need to work on how we are going to measure, to report, to verify, and to create additionality. And climate finance, not because it's finance, but it's because the requirement for the funder agency so far needs this information. So we need to go in this tunnel. This is rather complex, but we don't have time. From my perspective, we have 3-4 years to demonstrate within 2, 4, 5 big projects that it's feasible, and we are in position to scale up. So I don't want to be too long, but this is very challenging, and we are very lucky and proud because some governments have been confident with us. We have also been involved in the finance climate through ET Carbon and some other, and now with the Green Climate Fund. And I think this is very interesting because we also work with a negotiation process. We provide for the Francophonie the guide for negotiation. So we train country, and at the end, we also face the schizophrenic approach. All these guys are concerned, but all these guys don't know how to do it, and all our requirements put them in a schizophrenic approach. Even here in Bonn, we are working on the rules. Wow, wonderful. I had an interview this morning with the Fijian girls, and she asked me, what's about the Fijian presidency? But don't focus too much on rules. Make a step-by-step rules to make easy enough for country to implement. And after, focus on the means to support the rules. Because now we will have for the next year rules, wonderful. With a facilitation dialogue, you know, to increase ambition. Oh, but it's just a nightmare. People just really believe that developing country will increase. I really believe that they will decrease because they realize they will not be in position to achieve. You know, so this is really something we need to take into account. So INDC for me is just an entry door. So okay, I don't want to be too long, but this is my vision about INDC and what we are doing so far in this field, because we are quite well recognized so far because we work on a transversal issue. And as Laurent was saying, I think now if we want to support this kind of technology, we need to enlarge. Because since I'm working in this field since 30 years, you know, and so we just repeat things. Since 30 years, we speak about this technology. And as you say, people just consider again, this is something new. So it makes no sense. So we need now to enlarge, trying to really make the links with adaptations, with data. This is crucial. With measurements, this is crucial. With something to be additional, this is crucial. But this is challenging because we never experiment. So this is just an open box, and we need all together to be inside the box to after make our coming out for this subject, you know. So this is very important. So thank you.
Thank you, and that's actually a very wonderful sort of summary of where we are and where we need to be. So unless anybody has any last words, I think that we've run up against our time. I want to thank everybody for your wonderful presentations, and thank Energies 2050 for making it possible for us to talk about solar cookers and really explore in some depth where we are with the technology. Thank you.
We'll be trying out some of your handouts over there because I'm very curious.
All right, thank you.